Think about the last toxic person in your life, the one who drained you, the one who disappointed you, the one who, if you are honest, you saw warning signs about early on, and stayed anyway. Now think about the one before that, and the one before that. Different faces, different names, different circumstances, same pattern, same ending, same feeling when it was over. And the question that follows you, quietly, honestly, is why? Why do I keep ending up here? Why does this keep happening? Why, despite everything I know, everything I have learned, everything I have promised myself, do I keep attracting the same kind of person? Carl Jung had a precise answer to that question. Not a comforting one, not a simple one, but an honest one. And once you understand it, truly understand it, not just intellectually, but in the gut, you will never look at your relationships the same way again. Part 1. What Jung actually said. 2080. Jung did not believe that toxic relationships were primarily about bad luck. He did not believe they were about poor judgment. He did not believe they were about a deficit of self-worth, at least not in the simple sense that most self-help frameworks suggest. He believed they were about the shadow. The shadow, in Jung's precise framework, is not simply the dark side of the personality in the dramatic sense. It is everything that was rejected in the building of the acceptable self. Every quality, every emotion, every desire, every authentic response that was deemed inappropriate, too much, too selfish, too angry, too needy, too unconventional, and was therefore suppressed. The anger that was not permitted, the neediness that was shamed, the desire for power or attention or recognition that was declared unseemly, the parts of the self that the family, the culture, the religion, the social environment said were not acceptable. All of it went into the shadow, into the unconscious, where it did not disappear, where it waited. And here is the specific mechanism that Jung identified, the one that explains the pattern you keep living out. The shadow projects. Jung wrote in 2 essays on analytical psychology that what we cannot see in ourselves, what we have buried in the unconscious, we see with perfect clarity in others. Not because we are deliberately looking for it, because the unconscious places it there, projects it outward onto the people around us. And the people who most perfectly carry our projected shadow material, the people who most completely embody what we have buried in ourselves, are the people we feel the most powerfully drawn to. Not despite their toxicity, because of what they are carrying on our behalf. Part 2. The mechanism of projection. Aion, 15. To understand why you keep attracting toxic people, you need to understand projection with precision, not in the vague sense of seeing your flaws in others, in the specific, clinical sense that Jung meant. When a quality is buried deeply enough in the shadow, when it has been suppressed for long enough, with enough shame or fear attached to it, the psyche cannot tolerate it existing consciously. It cannot be owned. It cannot be acknowledged as part of the self. So instead the unconscious places it outside, projects it onto another person, and suddenly you are not the one who carries this quality. Someone else is. Someone you are powerfully drawn to, or powerfully repelled by, or both simultaneously. This is why the attraction to toxic people so often feels compulsive, not chosen, not rational, electric in a way that ordinary attraction is not. Because what you are responding to is not simply another person. You are responding to your own shadow, reflected back at you from the outside. And the unconscious recognizes its own material. It is drawn toward it the way a compass needle is drawn toward north, not because you chose it. Because the psyche is seeking, always seeking, to complete what has been left incomplete, to integrate what has been split off, to bring into consciousness what has been buried in the dark. The toxic person is, in this precise psychological sense, a carrier. They are carrying something that belongs to your inner world, something your psyche recognizes, something your unconscious needs to engage with, not to endorse, not to become, to understand, to finally see, clearly, honestly, in the outer world, because it has been too threatening to see in the inner one. Jung wrote in Aion that the meeting with oneself is at first the meeting with one's own shadow, and often the meeting with one's own shadow happens first in the form of the people we are most powerfully drawn to. Part 3. What your pattern is actually telling you. 15,021. The specific type of toxic person you keep attracting is not random, it is precise. It corresponds, with remarkable accuracy, to the specific material living in your shadow. The person who keeps attracting emotionally unavailable partners has almost always buried their own fear of intimacy, their own terror of being truly known, their own impulse to withdraw when connection becomes too real. That material, too threatening to acknowledge consciously, gets projected onto partners. And suddenly, they are the ones who are emotionally unavailable. The self is off the hook, but the pattern continues. Because the unconscious keeps generating the same situation, over and over, until the projection is recognized for what it is. Until the buried material is taken back inward. Until the person can finally say, the unavailability is not only in them, it is also in me. The person who keeps attracting controlling or domineering partners has almost always suppressed their own need for power and control, their own desire to direct, to dominate, to have things on their own terms. That desire was buried, perhaps because it was shamed, perhaps because it conflicted with a self-image of being accommodating and easygoing. So it went into the shadow. And then it appeared, reliably, specifically, in the partners they chose. The person who keeps attracting narcissistic partners has almost always suppressed their own need for attention and admiration, their own desire to be seen, celebrated, recognized as special. That desire was buried, perhaps because wanting attention felt shameful, perhaps because someone early in life communicated that their needs were too much. So it went into the shadow, and there it was, in every relationship, in the partner who demanded the attention and admiration the self could not permit itself to want. Jung's framework does not say you caused the toxicity. It does not say you deserved it. It says something more precise and more useful. It says the pattern has a logic. And the logic is pointing directly at what needs to be integrated. Part 4. The Golden Shadow. 21 Neuro. 27 Neuro. There is a dimension of this that almost no one discusses, and it is the dimension that most completely explains why toxic relationships feel so specifically electric, so distinctly different from ordinary attraction. Jung called it the golden shadow. The shadow does not only contain what is dark, it also contains what is golden. The suppressed potential, the buried vitality, the authentic power and aliveness and desire that was set aside in the building of the acceptable self. The creativity that was declared impractical, the ambition that was called selfish, the passion that was deemed inappropriate, the aliveness that was managed into something more controlled and acceptable. All of it went into the shadow too. And when a person encounters someone who openly expresses their golden shadow material, who lives freely in ways the self has forbidden, the attraction is overwhelming. It feels like recognition, like coming home, like finding something that has been missing for years. This is why the toxic person so often seems, at first, like the most alive and magnetic person you have ever encountered. Because they are carrying your own suppressed vitality, your own buried aliveness, your own golden shadow projected outward onto them. And you are drawn to it with an intensity that ordinary attraction cannot produce. Because you are not just attracted to them. You are attracted to the parts of yourself that have been waiting, in the shadow, for permission to exist. The solution is not to stop being attracted to vitality and aliveness. The solution is to develop those qualities consciously in yourself. to reclaim the golden shadow, to stop needing to find your own suppressed aliveness in other people, because you have finally given it permission to live in you. When you do that, the compulsive quality of the toxic attraction diminishes, not because you have suppressed the desire, because you have integrated what the desire was pointing toward. Part 5. Why self-awareness alone does not break the pattern. 27 minutes to 33 minutes. Most people who keep attracting toxic relationships are not lacking in self-awareness. They often have considerable self-awareness. They can describe the pattern clearly. They can identify the warning signs. They can articulate exactly what keeps happening. And then they do it again. Jung understood why. He wrote in The Structure and Dynamics of the Psyche that intellectual understanding of the unconscious is not the same as integration. Knowing about the shadow is not the same as meeting the shadow. Reading about projection is not the same as withdrawing the projection. Understanding the concept of the toxic attraction pattern is not the same as doing the inner work that changes the pattern. The pattern changes not when you understand it. It changes when you feel it. When you sit with the shadow material directly, not as a concept, but as a lived experience. When you acknowledge, with full emotional honesty, not just intellectual recognition, that the quality you keep finding in toxic partners lives in you. When you stop projecting and start integrating. This is the work Jung called shadow work, and it is not comfortable. It requires sitting with what the first half of your life worked hard to suppress. Acknowledging the anger you were not permitted to feel. Recognizing the need for control or attention or power that you have been disowning. Seeing clearly, without self-judgment, the parts of yourself that have been too threatening to acknowledge, not to act on them indiscriminately, to own them, to bring them from the unconscious into consciousness, where they can be understood, related to, integrated, rather than continuing to operate in the dark and drive the pattern from below. Part 6. How to actually break the pattern. 33 minutes to 38 minutes, 30 seconds. Jung's framework points toward a specific process, not a quick fix, not a technique. A genuine process of psychological work that changes the pattern at its root. The first step is mapping your pattern precisely, not in general terms. Specifically, write down the qualities of every significant toxic person in your life. Not what they did to you, what they were like, what specific qualities they carried, what specifically drew you to them in the beginning. Look for the common thread, not in the external details, in the psychological qualities. That thread is the map of your shadow. The second step is the question Jung would ask. For each quality you identified, ask honestly, where does this live in me? Not as self-punishment, as genuine inquiry. Where is the emotional unavailability in me? Where is the need for control in me? Where is the desire for attention and recognition in me? Where is the anger, the selfishness, the domination in me? These questions are uncomfortable precisely because they are reaching toward shadow material. The discomfort is a sign that you are in the right territory. The third step is sitting with what arises, not immediately managing or reframing or resolving, simply sitting with the honest recognition that these qualities belong to you, as much as they belong to the people you attracted. Feeling the full weight of that recognition, without self-judgment, with the specific kind of compassion that comes from understanding why these things went into the shadow in the first place. They were suppressed because they were threatening, because someone communicated, explicitly or implicitly, that these parts of you were unacceptable. You were doing the only thing available to you at the time. Now you have more options. The fourth step is reclamation. Finding ways to give the suppressed material some conscious, constructive form of expression. The anger given a healthy outlet. The need for recognition, acknowledged and addressed directly. The desire for power, expressed in ways that do not require a toxic relationship to carry it. The golden shadow, the suppressed vitality, and aliveness, consciously developed. This is not a one-time exercise. It is ongoing work, the kind that deepens over a lifetime of genuine engagement with the inner life. Close, 3830, 40, 0. The pattern of attracting toxic people is not evidence of something permanently broken in you. It is evidence of something that has not yet been integrated. Evidence of shadow material that has been waiting, in some cases for decades, for you to finally turn toward it, rather than continuing to project it outward. Every toxic relationship you have lived through was, at the psychological level, an attempt by the unconscious to show you something about yourself, something it could not show you any other way, something too threatening to see directly. So it placed it in front of you, in the form of a person, and waited for you to recognize it. The recognition, when it finally comes, is not comfortable. Jung never promised comfort. He promised something more valuable. He promised that the person who does this work, who genuinely meets their own shadow, rather than continuing to project it, arrives somewhere different. Not at a place where toxic relationships are simply avoided through better judgment, at a place where the compulsive pull toward them has diminished. Because the unconscious is no longer generating the same pressure. Because what the shadow was trying to show you has finally been seen. And what has been genuinely seen does not need to keep appearing in your outer world. It has finally been brought home. Subscribe to Carl Jung's Psychology and drop a comment below. What quality do you keep finding in the people you attract? You do not have to explain it. Just name it. That name is the beginning of understanding what your shadow is trying to show you.